Hi, it's Jim Connell. Welcome to the Craftsman Interview. I am here with Jeanne Konigseder, who is the co-founder of Liberty Coach. They make beautiful, beautiful coaches. And we're going to get into this story, a little bit about Jeanne and Frank's background, and obviously a lot about Liberty Coach and what they do. So, Jeanne, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it. So nice to see you. Before we get into the business side of it, I'm really interested in some of your background as well as Frank Sr.'s background. Where did you each grow up?
I grew up in Chicago until I was 14, and then we moved to Antioch, Illinois, until I graduated from high school. Then I went to nurses training in St. Teresa and Waukegan.
Okay. And so did you go to Antioch High School?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And how about Frank?
Frank went to Libertyville High School, and his early years were North Chicago.
Okay.
And his parents had a farm in Libertyville, and they moved out there, and then he went to Libertyville High School.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. A lot of roots in Libertyville then.
Yes.
That's great. What did your parents do for work?
My dad was a car salesman after he got out of the Army, and my stepmother, was a nurse.
Okay, so that's where your nursing
Right.
came from. Okay, and where did she work? What hospital?
She didn't work. She was an Army nurse, and my dad met her in the Army.
Okay.
Because my mother passed away when I was a year and a half.
Okay.
And then my dad went in the Army, and he met her in the Army, and they got married over there. Basically, why I wanted to be a nurse, I think, was because I lived with my grandmother for 6 years while my dad was in the Army, and my aunt was a nurse, and I was always wandering around in her nurse's uniform, even though it didn't fit real well.
My middle daughter, Caroline, is studying nursing right now, so it's near and dear to me, too. And how about Frank's parents?
Frank's parents, his dad came over here from Germany, and then he went back to Germany, and he married his mother, and then brought her back over here.
Okay.
And he was a pattern maker by trade, and he started FK Pattern and Foundry here in North Chicago. And they lived in North Chicago and then bought the farm in Libertyville and then moved out there.
So when you talk about the farm, tell me about that. How big?
It's about a 60-acre farm, 60, 80 acre, I'm not sure. And it was mostly grain farming.
Oh, okay.
And then they did have some animals, cows.
Okay.
And she had her own big garden there.
And where was that located?
That's actually on Buckley Road. It's right now, it's on the corner of the west corner of I-94 and Buckley Road.
Oh, yeah.
But actually, the toll road went through part of the farm.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And they had to move the house. There's pictures of them moving that big farmhouse.
So did they move it west? Or
Yes.
Yeah,
they moved it
okay.
further west and away. Yeah.
There's a lot of nice houses back there now.
Well, yes, and the farm got sold.
Okay.
And they have 69 homes in there.
Now, how did you and Frank meet?
I was a nurse at the hospital, and I was working on the orthopedic floor. And one day, this individual was brought up to our floor to have a hernia surgery, and the surgical floor was full, so they had to bring him up to our floor. So that was on a Thursday, and he had surgery. I was off that weekend. I came back on Monday, and I was all sunburned. Well, I had been out in my dad's boat, the chain of lakes where we lived then.
Yeah.
And he asked me where I got my sunburn, and I said, "Why you care?" And so then it was really funny. All of a sudden, it hit me, and I looked at him and I said, "Do you have a boat painted the same color as your car?" And here we have another resort around from our house, and I used to watch this guy come and put his boat in the water, and then we would lay on top of my friend's boathouse, which was on this channel, and they would go by. And one day, facetiously, I said, I'm going to meet that guy someday.
You've got to be kidding me.
No.
And then he became a patient of yours.
And then it was him.
Wow. Wow.
And so he went, I said, okay. And so he went home. And then about a week after that.
Hang on, Jeanne. Wait.
Okay.
Did you tell him how you got the sunburn?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I finally said I was out in my dad's boat, you know. But then, excuse me. So then, I was on vacation the following week, and he came home. He came out to see me. I was walking down the road after being on the boat, and there he was standing in the driveway. And the rest is history. That was 62 years ago.
Wow. Wow, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. So when did you get married?
We got married in 1960. We met in 58.
58.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we got married in 60.
Okay. And where did you get married?
We got married in St. Peter's in Antioch.
In Antioch. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have 2 children?
We have 2 boys, right?
Frank Jr. and Kurt.
Right.
Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit to the beginning of Liberty Coach. How long were you married before you sort of gave birth to the company? Can you kind of walk me through that a little bit?
Well, let's see. We started doing the Greyhound, I would say, in 69.
Okay.
And then, yeah, in 1969 when we started it in the backyard.
So you and Frank and Kurt were born by that time?
They were born 62 and 64.
Okay. Okay.
So they were little.
Okay. So did you work as a nurse when the kids were little?
No, I didn't work after Frank was born. I never went back to work.
Okay. Okay. So Frank Sr. was working at his dad's foundry at that time.
Correct.
And
His dad had passed away by then, and he was totally in charge of the foundry.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about the genesis of Liberty Coach. Can you walk me through? I'm fascinated by your story. Obviously, that goes without saying. That's why we're doing the interview. Walk me through the genesis of how you got your first coach and pretty much everything, if you don't mind.
Well, we had been camping with different camping vehicles. And then we went to this, went to the motorhome, and we wanted something bigger. And every time we looked for something, we couldn't really find what we wanted. And then Frank got the idea of doing an interior in an old bus. And the foundry had done work with Greyhound in making different parts for them,
Okay.
Greyhound Corporation. So we were familiar with the people from Greyhound, so he talked to one of the individuals about buying a bus, and we did. And we brought it home, brought it in the backyard, and at that time it was still farmyard, so nobody really cared what was going on. So anyway, we started the interior in this coach. And we worked on this coach in the backyard diligently. And there was one time when the boys wanted to swim. We had an out of the ground pool, and they weren't allowed in the pool unless we were there. Well, we basically were ignoring the 2 boys. And so one day, they had made a sign, and it said, "We want to go swimming," and the 2 of them marched it through the coach. So we put the tools down and said, "I think we better."
You were focused.
Yes. I think we better pay attention to the kids. But we worked on this coach for a total summer, all summer long. And we finally finished it in the fall.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with how these things are built and stuff, so I'm going to ask you some basic questions. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't find the size that you wanted. Frank identified, hey, well, I'll get a Greyhound bus, and we'll just outfit this thing to our own liking, right? You had to strip, you had to take everything out, didn't you?
They sold it to you without any seats.
Okay.
The back washroom was in it.
Okay.
And that was horrendous. And so we had to take that out. And beside that, the walls of the coach, we had to take them all out. And there were 40 million miles on this coach.
40 million?
Yes. And there was 40 million pieces of gum in this coach. That's where people stuck their gum in the sides.
Mm.
So it was a very messy job.
Yeah.
And it was the beginning.
In a hot summer?
Hot summer.
Sticky gum? Can't even imagine.
But we did it. And we just had to do a lot of things. You know, he was a builder, so he kind of figured out how to lay it out and how to build walls and
Okay.
furniture. I did all the drapes, the sewing, the fabric part of it. We put a ceiling up, not knowing how to do a upholstered ceiling. First we glued it up, and then we came out the next morning and it was all on the floor. So that wasn't really how you should put a ceiling up. And we didn't realize that Naugahyde had a memory, and we would roll fit it on a curvature. We would stretch it around a bowling ball, and then put it up there to have the curvature. But by morning it was straight. So we found out a lot of things.
Yeah, just trial and error.
Yep.
Trial and error.
And we had a distributor in Chicago that had a lot of motorhome parts, and you know, like your sinks, things for motorhomes. And so we had that to buy that kind of stuff from. But the rest you built yourself. And then we had our girl at the office at the foundry. Her father was an upholsterer, so he helped us with some of the upholstery that had to be done.
Okay.
And it was just a lot of work.
Was it fun?
Yeah, in a way it was. In a way it was, you came to a point where we're going to make a list of what we need to do. Mm-hmm. And by the time you got to page 4, you threw the list away because you might as well be working instead of spending all this time writing.
Right.
So
just get in there and do it.
Yes, right. And we also met another 2 gentlemen that were doing a bus also like ours in Chicago. And so we got to know them very well. And so we went and talked to them one night and looked at what they were doing. And I'll never forget, they had a couch that pulled out into a bed. And they were really happy with that, and 2 chairs. And so I said to them, where do you put those chairs when you move this bed out? They didn't like me the rest of the night because they had to rethink of this whole thing.
So, were coaches a thing at that time?
There were 2 companies that were very into it. One was Custom Coach in Ohio.
Okay.
But they did a lot of commercial. You know, like, they're the ones that did...
John Madden.
Yes.
Okay.
But the thing with Greyhound was that you had to take all the windows. And I'll get into that further when we can talk about Prevo. But then there was Wakefield Coach in Minnesota. And he was a gentleman we met, and he said, prepare to lose a lot of money. So it's fortunate we had the foundry and had another business.
Okay.
Because it just wouldn't have happened.
So that's an interesting thing. So coaches were a thing.
Yes.
And they were really starting to, those companies that you mentioned, Wakefield was it, and the one in Ohio, were they old companies or were they fairly new? Were they?
Custom was older. Wakefield was fairly new, but neither are around anymore.
Okay.
To my knowledge, I know Wakefield isn't. That was gone for a long time. But then there was Angola started in Indiana. And then at the same time we started, there was another one in Barrington. Tom Blickel started it.
Okay, so there were a number of them.
Yeah, there were some starting up. So we would show, and that was the thing. When you went to the FMCA convention, you had to be there. If you weren't there, you weren't in business.
And what's FMCA?
FMCA is the Family Motor Coach Association.
How did you know when it was a business And then how did you come up with the name?
We came up with the name because of Libertyville. We just kept thinking about names, and we just one day said, well, Liberty.
That's great. That's great. I had a hunch that was the story. Makes sense, but you never know.
We were doing all used coaches, and when it actually kicked in where this would be a real business, I think, is when we got in with Prevost. I mean, we were doing the Greyhound used, but you weren't going to live off that.
Okay.
Because we did some scenic cruisers, we did some MC5s, MC7, and gradually, but it wasn't enough to hold a whole crew of people, buy a building, you know, all that. But when Prevost came in is when we all started rolling.
Did they approach you, or did you approach them? How did that work?
We were at a FMCA convention in 1978 in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And these Prevost Frenchmen, they all spoke French except one, came up to us and asked Frank if he would do a coach. And they said, would you buy one of our coaches and do the interior? And Frank said, I'm not buying anything. He says, I'll do an interior, and when it's done, then we get the money. So that's what we did.
Okay.
And we took the first one after that to the convention in Del Mar, California, and we sold a lot off of that one coach.
Okay.
And the other people that were in it too, one from Barrington, he realized some from that too.
Okay.
And so that began.
So then it all started. What year was that?
1978.
78. Okay. What was your role in the company? How did you begin to kind of separate and say, okay, I'll tackle this, you tackle that, kind of similar to what you did all the sewing and the drapes, and it sounds like all of the design work, and Frank was more on the sort of the mechanical side.
Yeah. I did that, and then excuse me, the soft goods part of it. But then I also started the office procedure part of it, the purchasing and how we put all the spec sheets together, and basically started how the office atmosphere would be. And then got my own design room, which was in the old section.
Okay. In here?
No, well, it was another section. This was new over here. It was upstairs, but over in the other hall.
Okay, but same. We're in North Chicago right now. It's same campus, if you will.
Yes.
Okay. What was the hardest part of starting the company?
Money.
That's Frank, by the way. He's sitting right off camera.
Yes, actually it is. It's money, because it's a lot of money, and there's a tremendous amount of hours. And luckily at that time, because we had moved from the backyard to the back of the foundry.
Okay.
And then into this, then there was a trucking company that was at the other end of the foundry building, and that moved out. So we ended up moving in there.
Okay.
And it was long enough that we could put 3 coaches in line. And when you came in the morning, you had to come in on one side, and you better get in early enough so you got the time clock right, because you had to walk all the way down past 3 coaches and all the way up past 3 coaches to get to the time clock. But it was tight in there, but hey, you crawl before you walk.
Yeah, amen to that. How many employees did you kick off with?
Well, we had started out with a couple full-time cabinet makers, and surprisingly, we're right here next to Great Lakes Naval Base, and there's a lot of technicians, or what they call their firemen, that wanted second jobs.
Okay.
And they came in, and some of them came in just to be machinists for the foundry or work on some of the castings. Well, then some of them saw this, and they were electricians or whatever. So we were able to employ a lot of Navy.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's
so it worked
convenient.
out really well.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the key employees when you started? Is there a number of, or anybody who stands out where they were just pivotal?
There were a lot of cabinet makers that we knew in town that came in to work for us. Then we had an individual that came in, we had a couple individuals came in that were from Trinidad. And they're very talented in wood making.
Okay.
In fact, one just retired.
Really?
And Ramon was the nicest guy. He was very good in what he did. He was such a pleasant individual. And he was going back to Trinidad. So he retired, we had a little party for him. And that weekend he decided to buy a lottery ticket, and he won $1 million.
Happy retirement.
That's the best person I've ever heard of that could win a lottery ticket. I was so happy
cool.
for him.
That is so cool. And he went back to Trinidad.
Yes, he did.
Beautiful.
But we had a lot of different personalities, a lot of different people.
Yeah. A lot of craftsmen.
Yes.
I mean, this whole thing is really craftsmanship.
Right,
in
which
terms
is
of-
hard now.
Yeah, it's a lot hard.
Terrible
Different market.
now. It's so hard now. I mean, we don't have the tradesmen anymore.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame.
You have to train them. You have to teach them.
When did Frank Jr. and Kurt get involved with the business? I would imagine the sign with the swimming. they were young boys at that time, but did they have any involvement with
They were always involved.
Okay, so from day one.
Yes, they were always involved. They were always doing things. I mean, Frank, he could drive that coach when he was 11 years old.
Really?
And I mean, he would do, there's many stories with him, and we laughed so hard because the kid was only 11, you know. But I'll never forget Kurt, who runs this whole place. He was making labels when he was little.
Okay.
And the label machine. And I remember him one day, the only thing I'll ever get to do here is make labels.
Oh, to how times have changed.
Yes, I bet he wishes that's all he
So
did.
Kurt's got to know
Everything.
every corner of this place.
Oh, yes. There isn't a corner he doesn't know, believe me.
What is his? I've never really talked to him about work. What's his specialty? If you?
He actually designs the coach, the whole interior.
Oh, okay.
And also, he's the big money man.
Okay.
And he hated math. And he had to take it a couple times to get through college. And now he's spot on for whatever the bank wants. He's right there.
Wow. The coaches are stunningly beautiful. I mean, they're pieces of art. When did Dean Laux get involved?
Now that you've got me on as far as the time goes, but it's been a couple years now. It's at least I think 5 years.
Oh, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So it's fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
And Dean Laux is a artist who does all the painting.
Right.
Can you kind of walk me through some of the evolution, because the design today is a lot different than the design back in the 70s and 80s. Can you talk about what you did and how that changed, maybe a story or something around
Interior-wise?
interior-wise? Yeah.
Yes. Being as I'm a nurse and not a designer, I was kind of going by books. I mean, you know, when I would go to a movie, I would never watch a movie. I would just look at the background.
Yeah.
And I would go to the Mart and see what was new. And I would check out other people's coaches and see what they liked. And talking to people and see what they liked. And when Kurt asked me one day, he said, "Mom, do you think Kim could come down and help you in the design?" I said, "Could you start this afternoon?" because
Thought you'd never ask.
yes, I was at the limit of what I could do. I mean, I was not a designer. I was just looking and designing something I felt good in, or working off of people that would suggest what they liked, which I loved it when they would come in. And there aren't a lot of people that really know what they want. There are some that come in and when they know what they want, they really don't know what they want. But other people that are really easy and they, let's try this, they're easier to work with.
Yeah, so a lot of people know what they want when they see it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole different ball game than coming in
Right.
with a vision.
Right.
And Kim has that background.
Yes, and she's a natural. She's a natural in it. She didn't have to go to school. Like her mother is a natural artist, and she is, and so is her daughter. I mean, they're just natural on how they can do things. I mean, yeah, they went to school and got the basis, but basically they could do it without that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an art. I mean, that's
for sure.
really
Yeah.
an art to have. I don't. I can see things being done, and I know how to get done with things. I know more of a mechanical aspect of it than I do the fine design aspect of it.
Okay. So when did you start coming up with, or talk a little bit more about that. When did sort of this high-end design stuff, was it always a thing? Because I look at the decor from some of the older coaches, and I look at today, and I look at it as night and day. And maybe it's technology, but color schemes. I'm looking around Kim's office here, and I see samples of beautiful fabrics and tabletops and you name it. I mean, I told her, we were having a conversation the other day, and I said, you're in the fashion business. When did that really start to evolve with coaches?
Now, I have to go back. I did that. I did a real modern coach 84. 1984, I decided, I'm gonna try something. And we did the mirrored ceiling. We did the tiered ceiling. We did a lot of the ultra leather, which was almost like suede fabrics.
Okay.
Light. And I'll never forget when we took that to the show, they said, this will never show. This will never make it. We had lines 3 deep around that coach, and it sold.
And that was just a spark. I want to do something different.
Yes. And so it was that really sparked that, let's see what Liberty is doing. And that really started it. So then I was kind of really getting out of my zone when I did that. And then soon after, we just kept that kind of feeling going with the coaches, and people wanted it.
Wow.
I mean, they were happy with it.
What is the hardest part of the design aspect? Are there things that you wish people knew in terms of executing stuff like that? Can you just talk a little bit more about
You mean doing it and being the originators of it, or?
Yeah, both the application of it, the vision part, as well as the application part. Because I often look at things and go, okay, this is pie in the sky. I can see it in my head, what I would like this to look like. But actually pulling it off is a completely different thing. How do you?
It's just a lot of trial and error.
Okay.
I mean, you really try things and see how it works, and.
Is it a lot of wasted material?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that money.
Yeah.
You try things, and a lot of times you want to do more, but the market won't let you, because if you price yourself too high, you price yourself out of the market.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who will pay for anything.
Yeah.
But there aren't that many. I mean, you're going to have to stay where you are so you can stay in the market.
Right. Did you work, now this is just one of my fun questions, did you work with any famous people or because you talked about John Madden, for example. He obviously got the coach from somewhere else, but did you ever have any surprises, like, oh my gosh, they want a coach?
We did some country western people. But basically, our regular customers are famous people because they're the people that really appreciate the coach, really treat the coach with respect. I mean, we have people that he's still a customer of ours, which was one of the first ones we made, the Bravo.
Wow.
And he's still with us.
Do you know how many coaches he's in?
I think he's probably in 6. I think.
Wow.
I'm not sure. I don't keep track of it anymore.
And a lot of those people are small business owners themselves. They're a lot like
Yes.
you and Frank.
Yes,
You
they're
know,
very
we're-
much. Very much. A lot of them entrepreneurs. A lot of them started with nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a fellow who delivered fuel on a pickup truck in the hills of West Virginia and ended up owning probably all the gas stations in West Virginia. A nicest
like that.
gentleman, down to earth, sweetheart of a guy you'd ever want to meet.
What are some surprise things for people who buy a coach for the first time? What kind of not advice, but what are some things that come to mind when you think about a first purchaser of a coach?
It's scary because there's so much going on in there. I remember one individual, it was the first time he had a coach, and we asked him to stay overnight and just work the systems and know how everything goes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm fine. Nobody's need to tell me anything. I know how to work everything. It's okay. He wasn't, 20 miles down the road. So, I mean, it's scary when it's the first person, but usually they learn pretty quick.
Yeah. I was watching another video, and Frank Jr., by the way, is fantastic on video.
Mm-hmm.
And he I've seen a number of them where he would walk through the entire coach. And, here we are in 2023, the level of technology and the different systems that are in a coach is mind-blowing. And he talked a lot about the balance of the coach and the tightness of everything. It was just phenomenal. But they were talking about learning the systems and the importance of learning the systems and simple things like how to turn things on and off, how to compressors and all kinds of different mechanicals.
Well, he gives me a coach and says bye.
Frank Jr.?
Yeah, and I've got this coach where I haven't been in it for a coach for 6 months or something. Okay, so I do the best I can, and if I have a problem, I'll think, okay, I'll call the tech in Florida first, and then if that doesn't work out, I'll call the tech in Chicago, and then I'll call Frank, and he answers, I've been waiting for you.
He knew it was coming?
But, I mean, I can pretty well figure it out.
Yeah. You have a little bit of an advantage, Jeanne, you've built these things.
Yes.
Now, tell me a little bit about the driving experience of a coach. I mean, they're huge machines.
We all of us Konigseder women drive a coach.
Yeah.
And I know Frank would do it. I'd pack the coach and get it all ready, and we'd get in the coach and start driving. We'd be south of Chicago. So I'm really tired. Okay. So, but no, we've all driven them.
Do you need a class A?
It depends upon the state you're in.
Okay.
And actually, they're more, I don't know how you say it, but now I think it would be harder to do it without a CDL,
Okay.
legal-wise,
Gotcha.
than it was years ago.
Okay. Your customer service is amazing. I've seen the fact that you can reach Frank by cell phone anytime.
Right.
And I've seen some videos of customers talking about that. And you reminded me of that, Jeanne, when you were talking about him saying, I was waiting for your call.
Well, the service...
You called everybody before him,
Yeah.
right?
if you don't have service, you don't have a business. And that's the biggest thing today. I mean, I would no more want to get in this business today than flying to the moon. I mean, as intricate as these coaches are now, I mean, it wasn't like years ago. It was a Winnebago on a bigger chassis.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I mean, it's just so involved and computer-wise and everything, and green coaches and everything else that we're going into. But if you don't have service, you don't have a business. I mean, you have to. And now that's being so refined where my grandson has every coach on one phone that he has. And he can dial into that coach to see that it's electrically operating correctly.
Wow.
And so if it's not operating correctly and the batteries are going down or something is going wrong in that coach, that will notify him. And he can call the owner up and say, you need to go check your coach out.
Wow. That's fantastic.
So that's what I mean. They are
very advanced.
Very advanced.
Wow.
Which is good for these people because sometimes you forget and you don't push the right button, or you thought you did and you didn't, and you don't realize that.
Right. Well, there's two things going on. When you're in a coach and you're driving somewhere, you're thinking about traveling.
Right.
You're not. The
Yeah.
coach itself is sort of secondary to, I'm with my family or I'm with my friends and I'm going to my destination. Your headspace is probably not thinking about all the mechanical things that are going on with the coach. I mean, that's a huge benefit that you can look at all the systems and then send them a message and make them aware, hey, you're going a little light here, going down in power here. That's fantastic. What was your favorite trip in a coach? Do you have a favorite trip that you guys took as a family or as a business?
Well, we just about saw all 48 states before the kids went to college with the coach. Out west, I love it out there. I mean, you couldn't do any better out there. I mean, the mountains, and people talk about sending their kids to Europe and going to Europe and seeing. I thought, have you been west of the Mississippi? And a lot of people have never been that far. And there's so much out there to see. But we've done so much. I can't say that there's one that's particularly better than the other. I really can't.
When did you and Frank decide to step away?
Well, in the 90s, Frank's told me that I think we'll step away. And now I had been working probably 40 to 60 hours a week, and I could not handle that at all. I tried, and I can't do this. We decided to open up the store in Stewart, and that was September of 2001, right after the 9/11. And we were opening up the store. So I went down there, and I started the office, everything. All I didn't get into the sales aspect. Salesman did that, but I did everything else. The inventory, set up the inventory shelves. I didn't have a computer other than my little laptop. We had no computer system yet down there. So I went back to work then. And then after a couple of years, I started thinking, I think I want to retire. So I did for a while, and then something happened. I forget what. And my son said, could you come back for a while? Okay. So I came back. And that time when I retired, I was ready. You get to a point where you don't feel like you're putting your whole self into it anymore, and you are just not doing your job. And I'm a person that wants it done right from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I left that time, I felt good about it.
And that was the second time he asked you to come.
Yeah.
So there were.
Well, what happened was the girl had left in shipping and receiving and parts, and they needed me. And it's funny, I left. I was there a couple hours, and the service manager, came in with a bouquet of flowers. I guess
That's
You
great.
miss me that much?
Was that here or in Florida?
Florida.
That was in Florida too.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you just talk a little bit about being in and creating a family business? You know, you're working with your spouse, you're working with your children, you're working with your daughter-in-laws.
It's tough, and yet again, it's great. But the tough aspect of it is when things go down. When things go down. And what's bad about it is everybody goes down. And I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'll live in a cardboard box, but I don't want my kids to go down. And that's the thing that just bothers me more than anything. Not me, it's them.
Yeah.
Because everybody's in it together. So now everybody's here together, and it's great to see everybody together, but it's like you're still holding your breath, you know?
Yeah, the life of a business owner. It's probably healthy to have that.
Yeah,
It gives you an edge, right?
Well, it keeps you on your toes. Keeps
Yeah.
keeps you watching, and keeps you never. It seems like when you sit back and relax, bound to happen something.
Yeah, right. When's the shoe gonna drop,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So I have a few more questions, if you don't mind, and I'm just interested. Tell me about Kurt and Frank. I'm just coming up with this question on the fly, but in terms of work, what impresses you most about what Kurt does?
Kurt is very conscientious, extremely so. You don't spend any money with Kurt. Kurt is the one who is very, watches everything here. He's very astute, very quiet, doesn't say much, never did. He's always been that way as a child even, but he absorbs everything like a sponge.
Is that the part you enjoyed most about working with him? When you guys were working together, what did you enjoy most about working with Kurt?
Actually, I've never had to work with Kurt because by the time Kurt came here, I was in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah, in Florida. I
In
was down
Florida,
in Florida.
okay.
Yeah,
Right. Give me the same on Frank Jr.
And Frank?
Yeah.
Frank is, Frank wears all his feelings on his sleeve. I mean, you know exactly how he feels about everything.
Yeah.
And, but he's very smart. He's very honest. And he will be extremely honest with somebody, even though, I mean, if he knows he's wrong, he will admit it. And he will talk people through a lot of stuff that he's had to do to stand up for our company. He had some rough years standing up for our company totally by himself through no fault of his own. And he did a wonderful job at it. And he's an excellent speaker.
Yes.
And he does very well in his position that he holds. Both of them, I can't say enough for them. I
Very
can't say
complimentary
enough. Yes, they are.
Yeah. What did you enjoy most about working with Frank Jr. in Florida?
Well, he was, I knew everything was going to get done. I mean, we both worked together, and he knew what I needed, and I knew what he needed, and there wasn't any question. And if I didn't like something, I just told him, this is something's not going right here,
Yeah.
And there's no quibbling about it or anything, and he will sit down and analyze it, and we'll work it out.
Yeah. Can I ask about your daughters-in-law?
Sure.
Tell me what impresses you most about each of them as it relates to working here in the company.
Kim is a wonderful, wonderful person. Not only working, but being a daughter-in-law of mine. I mean, she's very understanding. I could call her any time and talk to her. And I don't have a girl. And now at my age is when you really miss not having a girl. And I don't want to burden her with anything, though, because she's got enough. But between her and Kurt, they've raised most wonderful children. They respect their parents like I've never seen.
That's beautiful.
Wonderful, wonderful. Denise is Frank's wife. She's new.
Okay.
I think 5-6 years, I don't know. She does very well with him. And she does the rallies now, which is what I used to do after I quit. I retired a third time. That's one thing I still did was the rallies.
Are you sure you're not coming back?
But she does the rallies well. She's learning a lot from doing that, because you do learn a lot. I mean, every rally you learn a few more things, and it's interesting. But she does real well. She does real well with Frank. We get along well.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I can imagine those are huge events, those rallies.
Oh, they're huge.
I mean,
and
the
to
logistics
satisfy
and-
100 people
Oh,
for 3 days?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely.
Yeah. You got stories in there too.
Yeah, right.
We won't get into
that's
that.
a volume.
That's back to your book.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Have you written
That's
about that in the
No,
book?
that's a separate volume.
Okay. I do want to add, Jeanne has written a book, and we're going to see that book one of these days. So just a couple more questions. What's your proudest achievement with Liberty Coach?
My proudest thing is to see my children all working together. Yeah, I really, and to see that they can keep this going. I mean, who knows? Who really knows in this day and age how long it can go? But that I couldn't be more proud of them and what they're doing, and Kurt the designing, and Frank the sales, and everything they do to promote the company for us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just a small family, and we made it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So that's a good segue to the last question that I have. And I can't thank you enough for doing this, Jeanne. This has been completely delightful on my part. I hope the same with you. If you could look 20 or 30 years out in the future, what would be your wish for Liberty Coach?
Well, I wish that it could still be going. I wish that it could still be going and still be family owned. But that's a big wish.
Yeah. So your wish is staying power. And I have a good feeling that wish is going to come true. And I can't wait to see your book. And I'm willing to help if you want to, print it. We got a printer friend of ours that can print it for you. And I just want to say thank you again for doing this. It's so great to meet you and hear your story. And thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
That's a wrap, George.